Bringing people and communities together on seclosounds.org.
Your listening station.
This week, the travel show comes to you with the letter A when I speak to Jesse Carlstrom of the Alaskan Tourist Board. That's all coming up on the John Guinn Travel Show on seclosounds.org. Hello and welcome to the John Guinn Travel Show on seclosounds.org. So on the show this week, I'm speaking to Jesse from the Alaskan Tourist Office. The conversation was recorded via Skype. Me in the UK, him in Alaska, so the audio quality gets a little bit scratchy every now and again. And if you listen carefully, you hear some background noise, such as my dog Max, who decided to bark at somebody who came near the studio. You get to hear what a dog sounds like when it's picked up from the microphone in the UK, and then over to Alaska, and then comes back again. Interesting fact for you to listen out to. So we start off by finding out the history of Alaska, and also a question which I wasn't really meant to mention according to the PR company from this end. I wanted to find out why Alaska isn't part of Canada. Looking at the map where Alaska is, you might wonder why you're not part of Canada, but is it true you're actually part of Russia?
Well, a lot of people think that we're either part of Russia, part of Canada, or our own country. A common question is what currency do you use, but we use U.S. dollars, and we're part of the United States. Russians were the first Western explorers to, quote-unquote, discover Alaska, even though Alaska's been inhabited by indigenous peoples for thousands of years. And then, long story short, Russia sold Alaska to the U.S. And it's much more involved than that, but that's the gist of it. Secretary of State William Seward made the purchase.
Okay, so you're basically a second-hand state then, I suppose you could say. But when you think about America, you always think that Texas is the biggest, but is it true that you're the largest state?
It's true. Alaska is the largest state. In fact, Alaska is so big that if we cut Alaska in half, Texas would still be the third largest. It's amazing. It's just vast.
I saw a film about birdwatching, and part of it was based on an island of Alaska, and it is practically in Russia. So how far out do you stretch across the sea?
Well, the Aleutian Islands, which are in the southwest corner of Alaska, stretch west for about 1,900 kilometers. Mm-hmm. So it goes quite a ways out there. In fact, the Aleutians go so far out that it makes Alaska not only the westernmost state in the United States, but also the easternmost, because we cross the international date line. Mm-hmm. It's fairly stunning. But even though they get close to Russia, the islands are still in U.S. territorial waters, and, mm-hmm. and the Russia's Kuril Islands, I'm mispronouncing that a little bit, are just about 1,200 kilometers away from the furthest west Aleutians.
Are they all inhabited, or are most of them empty?
Primarily empty. I mean, like most of Alaska, it's just vast, untouched wilderness. There are quite a few islands that are inhabited. Attu, which is the furthest west, has about 20 people on it currently. So it's a small population.
How do they get on?
I don't know. It's so far off. To tell you the truth, in all honesty, I've never been that far west, and most Alaskans, most visitors, it's just a really remote part of the state, part of the world. Though there's a sizable population in Dutch Harbor, which is the headquarters of Southeast Fishing Fleet, major fishery, and there's about 4,000 people living on Alaska. And neighboring Amaknak Island.
Mm-hmm. I'm glad you pronounced that because I wouldn't stand a chance.
Yeah, well, I say it with confidence, but I tell you what, it's a challenge for everyone.
You're a long way away, but how would somebody from the UK get to Alaska?
Well, we're a long way, but not as far off as a lot of people would think. Especially this year, for the first time, in a long time, the connection has not been as good as what we have this year. Iceland Air just announced service, and actually it was just last week they flew their inaugural flight from Reykjavik to Anchorage, and Iceland Air connects with four airports in the UK, and it's about I think it's around a 4 hour flight to Reykjavik from across the UK, and then another 7.5 hours to Anchorage. And then from Anchorage, guests can travel all over the state. Fantastic connections with Alaska Airlines and other local regional carriers.
So it's really not that bad, is it, when you think about it? It can be 12 hours to Vancouver, so that's pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, and there it is. It's really, this flight, this new air service, really overcomes the big hurdle that a lot of people have faced in the past. And you're right, the direct flights to Vancouver have facilitated a lot of cruise passenger traffic, especially from the UK. This new flight to Anchorage will also enable guests to cruise, but it'll get them to the heart of the mainland a lot faster. So it just opens up a whole lot of new opportunities. Otherwise, guests can continue flying BA or any of the other carriers to major U.S. cities and then hop on connecting flights.
Gary Fitz here, every Monday, 10 o'clock. Coming up, we've got Eric and Ernie. Join me here on Seclo Sounds.
In your smile.
It's from 1975, Eric and Ernie were four...
Gary, it's not Eric and Ernie, it's Earl and Ernie, the Cape Brothers, Union Man.
Oh, I see. Gary Fitz here, every Monday, 10 o'clock.
Earl and Ernie.
You're listening to the John Guinn Travel Show on seclosounds.org. So this week's show is a special on Alaska, which is high up on my bucket list. To be perfectly honest, I'm not that keen on the idea of visiting the US because of the immigration requirements and just grates with me. But as I say, Alaska is high up on the list, especially because of the interview I did with Jesse to find out more about these states, and also I went along to a travel trade event sponsored by the Alaskan Tourist Board, and I spoke to some of the providers of holidays in Alaska, and it's definitely somewhere you should go. And also, if you're going on a cruise, as you find from this interview, that just doing a cruise up the coast and then turn around and come back again, you're missing a great opportunity to see a lot of Alaska, and especially now because of the new ways to get to Alaska via Reykjavik. But anyhow, we're getting back to the conversation with Jesse, and we're now going to find out what the climate is like. We've already mentioned maybe it's a bit cold out there, but what is the weather like year round?
It is so variable. It's hard to sum up the weather in just a fine, in the fine boxes or fine into seasons. So to give you an example, my hometown in Fairbanks, Alaska, which is in the interior part of the state, right in the middle, it has a swing of about minus 40 Celsius in the winter. It can be minus 40, not all the time, to into the 30s in the summer. So a stunning swing. In Anchorage right now, where I currently live and along Alaska's coastline, the temperatures are much more mild. So definitely in the winter, a little below freezing, and in the summer, warmer. I mean, short weather for sure. And it just really depends on the location, but also it just varies in the day. So we really tell guests that they need to be prepared for quickly changing weather conditions, and it's all about dressing in layers in Alaska. It's all about being able to regulate and take a layer off, put a layer on as the day progresses.
Okay, so prepare for shorts, but you might have to wear a few layers as well then.
Exactly. And just to give you an idea, and this was a freakish storm, which is not typical, but this weekend, it was last Friday and Saturday, we had a amazing snowstorm in Anchorage, but also all over the south central part of the state. And so on Saturday and Sunday, I was skiing fresh powder in shorts in the mountains just outside of Anchorage. And on my face, if you could see me right now, I'm quite sunburned, actually.
Yeah.
I skimped on the sunscreen on Saturday because it was the middle of the blizzard, but still the UV just got to me. But it's fantastic.
You had a good time then?
Always having a good time here.
Yeah, great. When I picture Alaska, I always think of lakes and mountains, but have you got a few lakes? Do you know how many you've got?
We have tons of lakes. We have so many. I wrote it down. I have the no, just a second. Just how many? Because the number is staggering. So in Alaska, there are over 3 million unnamed natural lakes. There's about 3,000. Exactly, it's about 3,197 that are officially named natural lakes. So more lakes than you can really grasp. It's one of the things about Alaska is that there's just so much space, and it's really when you're in a small plane. For me, at least, that's when it really makes sense. That's when I can really grasp just how big the place is. When you get up in a small plane, or we call a bush plane, and get to see for miles and miles, and looking down, flying over lake after lake after lake after river, and on, it really is staggering.
Okay, so you must have a few national parks as well across the state. How many have you got?
Yeah, strictly speaking, we have 8 national parks, including the United States' largest national park, Wrangell St. Elias. A lot of times people, including locals, including people who have grown up their entire lives in Alaska, get the national parks confused with the national preserves, monuments, and historical parks, which together are known as just national park lands, and Alaska has 15 of them.
Is the biggest one the most popular?
It's actually, it's not. It's a little bit of, I think, surprising to a lot of people. And again, popular versus most visited. I guess I should separate these two things. I'd say everybody has their personal favorite national park. For me, I grew up in Fairbanks, so Denali National Park is a personal favorite of mine. I just grew up going there all the time. And for a lot of people, Denali is the iconic park that's really known for Mount McKinley, which is the tallest mountain in North America. But the most visited park is actually one of the smallest. It's the Sitka. It's Klondike Gold Rush National Park in Skagway. Okay. And the primary reason that so many people are coming there is because Skagway is a fantastic port call for the cruise ships. So the vast majority of cruise ships are making a stop in Skagway, and to see the Klondike Gold Rush National Historic Park is a must on everyone's list.
I assume that most of your visitors are actually from the cruise lines then, more than... Yes,
definitely. It's about... overall, it's around 70% of visitors to Alaska are coming on the cruise ships. And for the UK market specifically, folks love to cruise in the UK, at least in Alaska. Yeah. And it's about 82% of visitors from the UK are cruising. Something else that's interesting is that 76% of folks cruising are actually taking, and specifically from the UK, are taking round-trip cruises, either out of Vancouver or Seattle, where they board the ship, cruise around, generally up to Glacier Bay, fantastic part of the state, and then return and disembark at the point of embarkation.
Okay.
So I think that's just something for guests to keep in mind, especially with this new air service from Iceland Air, which enables easier connections and it's become more viable to do a one-way cruise, which enables the guests to see more of the state. And if there's anything I've heard from guests and tour operators that have visited, the one thing that they say, and I've heard over and over again, is that they wish they would have stayed a little longer and seen some of the land parts of the state. And they just don't realize how much different, how much more there is to see, and how different it is in places like Anchorage and Fairbanks.
You're listening to the John Guinn Travel Show on SecCloSounds.org. Alaska isn't just wide open spaces, there are towns and cities there too. Although probably comparing the size of these cities to the cities here in the UK, they probably seem very small. For the next part of my chat with Jesse, we're now going to look at what Anchorage and Fairbanks has to offer the tourist. Seeing you mentioned Anchorage and Fairbanks, what do these two cities have to offer?
Well, they're two fantastic communities. I've lived in both. Fairbanks is my hometown, and Anchorage is where I live now. So we'll start out with Fairbanks, my hometown. Geographies are completely different. So people are experiencing a different weather, different scenery. Fairbanks is characterized by rolling hills and a large valley, the Tanana Valley. Fairbanks has a boreal forest, and in the summertime, when most visitors are coming to the state, really nice, sunny, warm weather. There's a mountain range to the north, which is the Brooks Range, and a mountain range to the south, the Alaska Range, also home to Denali, or Mount McKinley. And these two mountain ranges block the coastal weather systems. So Fairbanks is actually a desert, technically. I mean, it's very green, but by rainfall, it's a desert. And that's really nice for the summertime, keeps things nice and hot. And then in the wintertime, it, again, blocks the coastal weather systems, keeping the sky is very clear, which enables fantastic aurora viewing. Fairbanks is by far the best place to see the northern lights in the world. It's directly underneath what's known as the aurora belt, or a strip of auroral activity, which covers Canada, Finland, the Scandinavian countries, Sweden, Norway, Iceland, Russia. But what really separates Fairbanks from these other areas is that the coastal weather systems just aren't able to get there to block the skies, unlike some of the other places. So a great town, and very, very warm, welcoming community. And Anchorage is Alaska's largest city. And when I say largest, it's all relative. It's actually just under 300,000 people, roughly half the state. In Anchorage proper, it's about 40% of the Alaska's population. And like I said, it's all relative. I mean, so even though it's Alaska's largest city, it still has many elements of a small town. It really has a small town feel, strong community, stunning mountains around it. Anchorage is surrounded by Chugach Mountains to the east, and Cook Inlet and the water to the west. And Anchorage offers a lot of local cultural activities. We have a fantastic museum, the Anchorage Museum, as well as the Alaska Native Cultural Center, Heritage Center. And it's a great place for visitors to begin their trip, end the trip, and to use as a jumping off point. Though guests could easily have their entire vacation just in Anchorage, in and around Anchorage, and be completely satisfied. It's an amazing place to live.
Is there much in the way of nightlife?
There is. There's good nightlife, and it just depends on what people are thinking about. Anchorage has some great bars, great restaurants. Something that's really fun about the nightlife here is that as you get further north in the state, and in the summertime, the sun stays up longer and longer. Alaska is the land of the midnight sun, and so not sure if I say this on the radio, but many times when I've come out of the bar at 2, 3, 4 in the morning, it's still light outside, and so it really throws people for a loop. But that has a great nightlife.
I'm sure you're just doing that to test it out. That's all you were doing, just making sure that it was daylight at that time of night.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure the sun's still coming up.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing that for us.
Yeah.
Okay, we covered the cities. Let's go back to the lakes and mountains. And I must admit, when I see pictures of all these trees and mountains and lakes, I always think about mosquitoes and midges and other biting insects. Does that happen in Alaska, or am I just imagining it?
It varies. So to some degree, you're just imagining it, but there's definitely an element of truth. So where most guests will visit, in a Skagway, Juneau, Ketchikan, Haines, Anchorage, along the coast, very, very few mosquitoes. Even in Fairbanks, in the places where most guests are going, I mean, they're definitely there. Like, don't get me wrong, the mosquitoes are around, but they're not a nuisance. I can't remember the last time I put on any bug dope or bug spray, bug repellent, in any of these places. Now, when you're getting out of town, when you get more into the remote and off the beaten path a little bit more, definitely you notice them more. And in some places, for example, a few years ago, I took a 3-week camping trip north of the Brooks Range in Alaska's Arctic, and they were miserable. It was unmitigated misery with the mosquitoes. There are just tons of them. But again, nothing that bug dope doesn't fix. So I wouldn't, if I was considering visiting Alaska, I wouldn't even bother to bring bug spray unless I was planning to go way, way out into the bush, into the kind of swampy tundra areas. So for most, doesn't matter at all.
Okay, good. I did the Caribbean before Christmas, and I got bit before I got from the plane to immigration. I might as well have a big sign above my head saying "Bite me."
Yeah. And actually, I had a holiday down in the Yucatan a few years ago, and I remember that the mosquitoes, in the day they were fine, weren't there at all, but then the evening came, and they just came out in droves. I was really shocked. I thought, man, I thought Alaska had mosquitoes, but nothing compared to a lot of other places, so...
Okay.
It's all about perspective.
Yeah, you're already on top of my list now for that, not having many. Talking about other animals, I'm guessing that bear safaris are popular, but what other wildlife can you see on a visit?
Alaska has so much wildlife all over the state. So it really depends on where people are going and at what season. But in a nutshell, Alaska has 90 wildlife mammal species. Some of the most popular and most typical to see are moose, like you said, bears, brown bears, black bears. Caribou are very typical. Wolves once in a while. More often than not, you'll see a wolf in Denali. Foxes, porcupines. Alaska is home to muskox, which are fairly odd animal, but pretty fun to see. There's a couple of muskox farms around the state, and then they also roam free up in the Nome area, the Seward Peninsula. So that's cool. So, and it really just depends on where people go and at what season. Marine wildlife is also very typical to see. So guests often see whales, gray whales, humpback whales, orca whales, sea lions, sea otters are very typical. So.
Well, I like sea otters. I'm going to have to come and see the sea otters now because they're really cute.
Yeah. And it's funny to give an example just of how many animals people will see and what's typical. Of course, you can never predict and guarantee what wildlife people will see and at what time because it's wildlife. But a lot of these things are very, very typical. And so when a guest takes a day cruise, for example, either in Southeast or South Central, like Whittier or Seward, for example, the boat will cruise out and then see an otter or two and slow down, and everybody rushes to the side of the boat, and it click, 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 so many pictures, and then everybody's kind of, oh, don't go yet, when the captain revs the engine and takes off. And then they stop at the next raft of otters, and the next raft. And then eventually nobody even notices. They don't get up, and the boat just cruises by. So, and that goes for tours in Denali National Park as well, where everybody just clambers to the side of the coach, just crawling over each other to take pictures of the moose or a bear. And then eventually, by the end of the tour, people are like,
yeah, another one.
It's another moose. keep going. Next stop.
Yeah, I've been on a safari like that. I got really excited on my first elephant, but then there was another one and another one.
Exactly.
Yeah. But no, I don't think I'll ever tire of sea otters though, but we'll soon see. Do you still have any glaciers up there?
Yeah, we do. We have just about 100,000 glaciers covering roughly 5% of the state. So we're in no shortage of glaciers. There's about 616 of them are officially named, and then there's just so many that whoever it is that's in charge of naming them must have given up a while ago.
So lazy.
Yeah, and the thing about the glaciers too is that they're really accessible. I mean, there's so many. A good chunk of them are either on the road system or on the waterways, and people can even access glaciers by flying in the summer and winter. But the summer is the main time for most guests to take a helicopter or a small plane, actually land on a glacier, and they can go dog sledding and make a snowman, and that's a pretty wild experience.
You mentioned the Gold Trail earlier, Klondike, I think you said.
Oh yeah.
Can you still go looking for gold? Does people still try and make a living out of it?
Yeah, actually, the gold mining. So there's a two-part answer to your question.
Okay.
The first is yes. Gold mining is actually one of the bigger industries in Alaska. There's a handful of major corporate mines throughout the state, as well as many what we call mom and pop miners working small claims. And so that's the first part of the question is yes, the mining industry is alive and well in Alaska. And then the second part is that visitors to Alaska can experience gold mining culture, both past and present. Most of the tours throughout the state focus on gold rush history more than anything, talking about the different rushes to Alaska, to the Klondike gold fields, to Nome, and all other places throughout the state. And then in a lot of instances, the tours will end with a gold panning session where guests take a gold pan, sift through the dirt, and pull out some gold to bring home.
There's no problem taking it home then, they can just take it.
Yep, no problem taking it home. Okay. And for some folks, this is not so typical, but there's definitely some guests that arrive to Alaska and they say, we want to go gold pan, we want to go search for gold, but we don't want to take a tour. They're really independent minded, and they want to do the quote unquote real thing. And so they'll go out, and there's mining shops, outdoor supply shops throughout the state. They can pick up a gold pan and then just go to a creek. There's also tours that do that as well, where they go out actually in the woods and find a spot and go to town.
Could help pay for the holiday, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. Get lucky, just like miners.
I'm not that sort of lucky. You can contact us or just keep up to date with travel news at facebook.com/John Guinn Travel Show.
This is Seclo Sounds, your community radio station. If you'd like to volunteer some of your time and skills with Seclo Sounds, send an email to volunteers@seclosounds.org and let us know how you would like to be involved. MK Flyers Online, the fast and simple way to find any kind of business or service locally. Find us at mkflyersonline.co.uk or download the MK Flyers mobile app from your app store. MK Flyers Online proudly supports Seklo Sounds, community radio for Milton Keynes.
The John Guinn Travel Show. Checking it out before you check in on seclosounds.org. Perhaps when you're thinking about Alaska, you might think about the picture that Homer Simpson holds up in the Simpsons movie, all mountains and snow. But there's also some volcanoes as well, and we're now going to find out a little bit more about how active the volcanoes are in Alaska.
Yeah, we have a ton of volcanoes. I don't know the exact number right off the top of my head. Most of the volcanoes, and actually it might even be all of the volcanoes, are along the Aleutian Islands and the coasts of Alaska, primarily the Aleutian Islands. And the Aleutian Islands really are it's a chain of volcanoes, and it's part of the Ring of Fire, which goes all around the Pacific. So lots of seismic activity, and it rarely does a volcano affect much of the population in Alaska. The biggest challenges that we have with volcanoes, for most people, it's not that big of a deal. Not I don't mean to downplay it for folks who are getting the ash dropped on them right now. But the biggest challenge we have is with flights and the airplanes, and it depends on where the ash cloud is going. But so far, the current eruption at the Cleveland volcano is having no effect on Anchorage and the other major population centers. So fairly isolated. A stunning tour in Alaska is to go to the Valley of 10,000 Smokes, which is located in Katmai National Park and Preserve. And this area is known, and it's really been the geography, the landscape has been characterized and altered by the eruption of the Nova Rupta volcano, which was a huge explosion. Of course, I wasn't there at the time. It was in 1912, but from what I hear, it was really big. I think it may have been
a big one.
Yeah, and that's a pretty unique experience. That can be accessed out of Anchorage by a small plane.
Small planes, is that the best way of getting around Alaska?
In a lot of cases, it's the only way to get around. It really depends. Alaska has more runways than roads, so much of the state is just completely off the road system. The bulk of the population lives in Fairbanks, Anchorage first, and then Fairbanks, the Matsu Valley, which is made up of Wasilla and Palmer, and then in Juneau and Southeast, which a lot of Southeast is also off the road system. But in the main kind of central part of the state, there's really two roads for all practical purposes. One going between Fairbanks and Anchorage, and the other going between Fairbanks and Valdez, and then one that links these two roads together. And so in a lot of cases, it's necessary to use a small plane, or what we call bush planes, to get out and see the country.
So it's not really a place you can just drive around and hire a car and go around. You should really plan in some small flights as well.
Well, I guess I should follow up my comment just a second ago with it's a fantastic to do a fly drive, to hire a car or a camper. When I say there are two main roads, that's the two big highways. Okay. So that's still well over. Let me think how many kilometers this would be. A lot of times we measure distances in Alaska in hours to drive, and it takes about 6 to 7 hours to drive directly from Anchorage to Fairbanks, and then 7 hours from Fairbanks to Valdez, and so on. So there's no shortage of areas to drive. That's for sure. And so people can have a fantastic holiday without using a small plane or bush plane. I guess if I was recommending an Alaskan itinerary to someone, and first of all ask, do you have any particular things you want to see or do or experience? And there's a number of ways to go about seeing and experiencing Alaska. I really think getting up in a small plane, for at least at a minimum, just a short sightseeing, flight seeing tour is well worth it. Well worth it, just because you can get up above the trees, above the mountains, and really get a sense of how remote a lot of the state is. And it's also fantastic to fly into an Alaska native community, a bush community, and see how people have been living for thousands of years, and in a lot of ways like they're living now, and generally very welcoming places, and definitely a unique experience that most visitors don't get to experience.
I do like the idea of going on a small plane and having a look down. Another way of getting around is husky sledges. Is that something that's big in Alaska? Is it something that a visitor can take part in?
Yes, husky, dog mushing or dog sledding is very popular. It's one of the most popular things to do and experience. It is high on the list of activities that most visitors have in the state. And it can be experienced year-round, in the winter or summer, in just about all of the, when I say major communities, I mean communities with more than a couple thousand people. So I guess in most towns and communities. And so in the summertime, guests will often fly in a helicopter or a small plane to a glacier, and they might have lots of sunscreen on. They might be in shorts. Generally, the guides like to give them boots, if nothing else, and snow boots. And then so they land on the glacier, get out, and actually ride around in the middle of summer. And then the other alternative is to go to a kennel, which is where the dogs are kept, and then ride behind a cart or a four-wheeler. So that's another way to experience the dog sledding.
Okay. Is it much of a spectator sport?
Yeah, it depends on the race. It really depends on the race. I guess, first of all, I should have said this in my earlier comment just about dog sledding in general, that mushing or dog sledding is still, it has been a major part of Alaska's culture, and it still is today. There are dog teams all across the state, and the racing is a big part of Alaska's dog mushing culture. Two of the biggest races are the Yukon Quest, which runs between Fairbanks and Whitehorse, Yukon, and the other, probably the most known event, is the Iditarod Trail sled dog race, which runs between Anchorage and Nome. And these are great, really fantastic races to watch. The most typical thing to do is watch the starting of them. Otherwise, watching the finishing, the end race, or end of the race. Otherwise, it's fairly remote. So definitely a great experience for folks who can afford the cost and the time to get out into the woods and see the events along the trail. Something that I think, personally, for me, the most fun dog races to watch, the most fun mushing races to watch, are the sprint series. And an example of this is at a festival that leading up to the Iditarod race every year in Anchorage. It's called Fur-Rondi, and they have a series of these sprint races around town. And I think that's really fun because it is more spectator friendly. You can see the dogs come around a number of times, and they're racing with these big teams going all out, and it's not like they're carrying loads of gear. So they're literally hanging on to the sled, and in a lot of cases, it looks like they're flying off the back. I mean, just getting dragged around sharp corners, and that's really fun. It's kind of like I'm sure mushers might disagree with my assessment of this, but to me, it's like almost like a car race or a roller derby. I mean, they're just flying around the track.
Have you ever taken part yourself?
I've gotten to mush. I took a tour. It was actually a class. I mean, I've ridden in the dog sled in what we call the basket many times growing up in Fairbanks, and then even now here in Anchorage and across the state. But a couple winters ago in Fairbanks, I took part in a mushing class, which is basically it's a tour offered by one of the mushers in Fairbanks. The company's called Pause for Adventure, and this class is a half day of learning how to harness and drive, control your own team. So I got to cruise around for the tour, managing my own team of dogs, and that was by far the most fun I've had with a dog team. I mean, really, really fun.
Yes, that is also on my bucket list. You've mentioned the couple of big dog races, dog sledging races. Are there any other big events that take part annually in Alaska?
A really big winter event is in Fairbanks. This is a World Ice Art Carving Championships. That's well attended and very fun thing to do. This Alaska State Fair is another big popular event. That's very big for locals.
Yeah,
Lots of people from especially the south central part of the state. Throughout all of Alaska, there's numerous events and festivals from folk fests. Alaskans love folk music and dancing and maybe a little drinking at these festivals that go on all night. And a lot of cases, the sun never goes down and people just don't go to bed. They just keep on dancing. Different arts and cultural activities, whale watching, as well as birding festivals throughout the state. So there's definitely something going on in most communities, especially in the summertime, just about every weekend.
Yep.
So it gives visitors a great chance to experience local culture and mingle with the Alaskans. We're friendly, so we are very, very welcoming group.
So they get a chance to join in.
Yep. So an example of, I actually just heard this on the news last night, just an example of some of the quirky, fun things that are going on at all times of the year in Ketchikan, which is in southeast Alaska. They just yesterday set the Guinness Book of World Records for the biggest welly race ever. So, are you familiar with the Wellington races?
No, go on. What's a Wellington race?
So the Wellington, the welly boots, just the rain boots. So I think it's fair to say that most people in Alaska have a pair of wellies, especially in southeast, where it's they might as well just issue them on arrival or birth. And it's typical to be, you could be in the nicest restaurant in town and somebody's got wellies on right next to you. And just really, really typical. And so they had a community, quote unquote, race. I think most people walked it. And they showed up with their Wellingtons. And I think they had 1,900 people in the walk. So that sets a Guinness Book World Record for the biggest welly race in the world ever. And there were a couple people sounded like they were visiting their friends. These couple women they were interviewed on the radio and said they're from the Netherlands. And what a kind of random but fun experience they had to join in the welly walk and get to be part of the local culture. So I think that really typifies Alaska and what Alaska has to offer. Community events that bring everybody together, and it doesn't matter where you're from or who you are, you participate.
I'm going to have to arrange a competition for that then, because we've also got the weather for willies, so
yes,
maybe we'll have to try and beat that.
When I heard this on the news last night, I thought, in Anchorage, I bet we could beat that record. So we'll get planning. State rivalry.
Yeah.
This is Seklo Sounds. Join us every Wednesday at 7 p.m. for 1 hour in the company of Harry and Edna on the wireless, exploring all aspects of the vintage scene and playing tip-top gramophone tunes. Harry and Edna on the wireless, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. on seklosounds.org. Jolly good.
My name's Teresa Kelleher. Join me on Seclo Sounds every Wednesday at 8 p.m. for my show Inspired by Jazz. Each week I'll take you on a journey as I feature the music, the maestros and the melodies. That's Inspired by Jazz with me, Teresa, every Wednesday at 8 p.m. on Seclo Sounds.
Hi, this is Russell Hearn. Join me Fridays at 12 for a little pick-me-up. I'll be playing the music that stirs those warm memories and takes you to a special time and place. And Millie's here with her choice of fun apps for your phone too. So for a lighter look at life and some songs you'll never forget, tune in to seclosounds.org for some happy radio.
You can contact us or just keep up to date with travel news at facebook.com/John Guinn Travel Show. You've been listening all through the show and finding out about Alaska, and you're probably wondering, why hasn't he mentioned it? He mentions it whenever he talks to anybody about a destination. Well, we finally reached that point in the chat with Jesse from the Alaskan Tourist Board. I'm now going to bring up food. Regular listeners to my show know I always go on about food. Is there a particular state dish for Alaska?
Ooh, there's a lot of great Alaskan food. By far, though, I think it's fair to say that Alaskan seafood is number one as far as a local specialty. We have all 5 species of salmon, giant Pacific halibut. So seafood. In short, seafood is the typical Alaskan specialty, and it can be enjoyed in restaurants all over the state, from very casual, just walk up, take away joints to the most high end restaurant. One of my favorite places to eat in Anchorage is it's a lot of people's favorite. It's definitely a local spot. Is Beartooth and Moose's Tooth pizza, and they even have, just to give you an idea of how the Alaskan seafood is everywhere, they have a pizza with Alaskan halibut. So it can be enjoyed in all different forms all over the state. Alaskans also love to drink beer. We love beer, and I know a lot of people around the world do. I feel like Alaskans in particular, and there are a number of different breweries making Alaska a homebrew beer. Well, I guess it's not homebrew, microbrew, including Silver Gulch Brewery, which is in Fairbanks. It's the northernmost brewery in the U.S. And the Alaskan Brewing Company, located in Juneau. It's actually fairly major brewery in the U.S. now. So that's something that guests can enjoy as well, to wash down that seafood.
Does any of the beer get exported at all? To keep it to yourselves?
The Alaskan brewery exports quite a bit, mostly to the western U.S. states, primarily. It's out in New York as well, and some of the smaller breweries, which still move quite a bit of beer, they also are exporting to the lower 48. I don't know where. Now, if anybody is exporting overseas, it would be the Alaskan Brewing Company. Like I said, they're by far the largest organization, and I just don't know if they're exporting overseas or not.
I'll have to keep an eye out. So you call the mainland the lower 48 then?
Yes.
Yeah. Is there much of a rivalry between you and the lower 48? Or do you...
Well, so I, at the risk of sounding pompous, I think the thing is, Alaskans just love Alaska, and life in Alaska is so much different than other parts of the U.S. And that said, I should be, life in California is different from life in New York, which is different from life in the Midwest. So the entire U.S. is, as you know, is just so big and home to so many diverse cultures. It's hard to compare just to the U.S., but without a doubt, Alaska is unique and definitely different from the lower 48. And Alaskans love to live here. An example is that I went to school took 1 year of university in New Mexico in the United States, and a couple of my roommates were from Texas, and we had another roommate from Michigan and another from Colorado. And I remember one of the guys, I think it was Brett, he's from Colorado, and he kind of shook his head one day and he said, "I never thought I'd meet anyone with as much state pride as a Texan." And then he said, "Until I met an Alaskan." So Alaskans definitely are happy to live here and think fairly highly of the state.
That's good to be proud of where you come from. It's in a couple of months you've got the 4th of July, which I guess is pretty big for all the Americans. Not so big for us British, but you know what I mean. Do you have a separate day for the day you were bought from Russia? Just wondering if you celebrate that at all.
Yeah, we have Alaska State Day. I'm trying to think, when was it? I tell you the truth, I haven't got it. I didn't get it off for the last few years. So, So Alaska Day, it's on October 18th, and it's the anniversary of the formal transfer of the territory of Alaska from Russia to the U.S. So that was back in Friday, October 18th of 1867. So a while ago. But for a lot of the state does get the day off.
Is it just as big as the 4th of July?
Probably not.
No.
I mean, it's the 4th of July has parades all across the state, and I guess the short answer is no. I mean, I think the people who get the day off, it might mean a little bit more to that. and just happy to be from Alaska for sure. I mean, definitely, we're proud to have Alaska Day. The special events and things that are really happening around town are definitely centered around the 4th of July.
Yeah. I guess the weather's warmer in July as well.
Exactly.
Yeah. You'll have to move your state day. How would my listeners find out more about Alaska?
A great way to find out more about Alaska is visiting our website at travelalaska.com, and this is the official State of Alaska's website promoting all tourism activities in all regions of the state, and I think offers a really good in-depth look at what Alaska has to offer a visitor. Another great way, and I think in some ways maybe the best way, to find out more about the state is contacting a local travel agent or tour operator. These tour operators, in Alaska, myself and a number of other suppliers, try our best to keep up with travel agents, tour operators throughout the UK, keeping them up to date, and often, in many cases, bringing them to Alaska to experience the products and activities, destinations for themselves. So it's great to call up a travel agent, ask them about Alaska, see what they recommend, and definitely look at all the options, because there's not just one way to see and experience the state. There's a number of different ways, from cruising to fly drives to organized group tours, and Alaska really has something for everyone, from mild to wild.
What would you say would be the minimum amount of time to spend in Alaska on a trip?
Ooh, that's a tough question. I think just like anywhere, it depends on what the guest has available as far as time goes. I've known people who have visited the state for just a night or two. I'd say I would personally aim for about a week.
Yep. Okay.
With a week, you can have a great, proper holiday, see a lot, experience a lot, eat a lot of great Alaskan seafood, and I'd say a week.
A week.
But again, 1 week's great. 2 weeks is better. 3 3 weeks, all the more better. So it's just one of those things. It's what people have the time for.
Yeah. Okay, but definitely not a day.
Definitely not a day. Too far to go for a day.
Yeah.
I say even 3 days would be a minimum.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll push everybody for 2 weeks. I think that should cover everything.
Yep, then we'll be good. 2 weeks is a great time. Even a little less than 2 weeks would. A guest could have a fantastic one-way cruise from either Vancouver from Vancouver to either Whittier or Seward, and then spend the next week traveling throughout the interior of the state. So, for example, they could take the Alaska Railroad from Seward or Whittier to Anchorage, a night or two in Anchorage, and then on to Talkeetna, which acts as the base camp. Well, the launching point for climbs on Denali, then visit Denali National Park, and eventually end up in Fairbanks and fly home from Fairbanks. That would be a fantastic program.
On the new flights via Iceland. Yeah.
Exactly. And the flights via Iceland take off from Anchorage, but they're easy connecting flights from Fairbanks to Anchorage, so not a problem.
No. Okay, great. Thanks, Jesse. Thanks for spending the time talking to us, and hopefully we'll get a few more people coming out your way.
Thanks for having me on. It's my pleasure.
Thanks. Well, that's the end of the John Guinn Travel Show on seclosounds.org for this week. I hope you found the information on Alaska informative, and maybe it's given you an idea of where you want to go for your next holiday. I'm actually going to try and put in a request to go pop over there now for this summer. Probably left it too late, but if I do, I'll tell you all about it when I come back. Because there's so much information on Alaska to share this week, there hasn't been any travel news. The only real news in the week has been the passport fiasco with the government. But as I mentioned last week, you know my views on that. But anyway, if you've been to Alaska, please share your pictures and your thoughts on facebook.com/John Guinn Travel Show. And also the links for the Alaskan Tourist Board will be on that page too. And hopefully you can join me next time on the John Guinn Travel Show on setclosesounds.org, where every week I'll be checking it out before you check in.
Around the world.
MK Pulse proudly sponsors Seclo Sounds. MK Pulse is Milton Keynes' local magazine, bringing helpful information on food, health, fashion, money, travel, culture, and much more to 66,000 readers every month. Plus news, views, and what's on from around the city. If it's happening in Milton Keynes, it's in MK Pulse, and it's available online at www.mkpulse.co.uk. MK Pulse and Seclo Sounds, the heart and soul of the city.